Hey guys, and welcome back to the official podcast of Development Unplugged. And this week we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, something that affects a lot of people, even successful people. And if you don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's that feeling of being a fraud, of not being qualified, of not having enough external validation sometimes. That feeling of, I don't have the right degree, the right amount of fans or subscribers, it's that kind of need of having something external or something in your past or your history validate you. And many people in this world have a lot of valuable stuff to share with the world, a lot of great capacities, capabilities, skill sets that they're devaluing, because we're all great at devaluing ourselves. We're great at devaluing ourselves because we compare ourselves to others, but we tend to compare ourselves with people who are good at things that we're not good at. But we forget that those same people that are good at different things, other things, might be looking at us and being jealous of the things we are good at. So we have to understand how to celebrate our actual capacities, our achievements, and also we have to be good at looking at every single win, every single achievement, and not just the long-term achievements, the long-term goals. Because in order to get to where we want to be, we need a series of many small wins, and we need a series of many moments of stepping out of our comfort zone. Many small decisions of, you know what, I am ready. You know what, someone is going to care about what I have to say. Someone is going to appreciate what I'm going to do. And even if it's just one person at a time, focus on the quality of your work rather than the external validation in the beginning, and little by little you'll end up improving both the quality of your work and you'll get more validation. So in today's episode we're going to be talking about that, but before that I just want to give a little bit of information about, if you're joining us for the first time, here at Develop Your Element, we talk about personal development, personality theory, personality psychology. We talk about well-being. We talk about communication with others. We talk about how to adapt your communication with people who have different personalities, different ways of being, and really connecting with people, really not devaluing yourself nor others, because we all have different contexts and different ways of operating. And if you're watching live, you can see behind we have different symbols of different elements. And within Develop Your Element, those are personality types we explore. But we also talk about how we're all a mix of different personality types. They're just some personality types that are easier to step into in certain moments. Some that are more natural, how we are wired. And then there are some that require more effort, and it's not that we can't do it. So everything we talk about in Develop Your Element is not to limit you or put you in a box or any of that stuff. It's really to give you a set of tools to, yes, operate in the way that's easiest for you as a base, but also to give you the skill sets and abilities to step out of your comfort zone and develop skill sets that really might be outside of your nature. And we talk about this concept of regenerative spaces. We talk about the activities, the environments, the types of stimulus that recharge us, primarily social stimulus. Extroverts need higher level of social stimulus. Introverts need lower level of social stimulus to recharge the battery. And we talk about how to diversify the ways we recharge so that we're always operating in our best version, operating as our best self. And we try to achieve that through a series of different steps. We try to overcome a lot of insecurities and fears that make us do things out of desperation or in a certain kind of competitive spirit that might not be a very healthy competition. And then we also try to focus on recharging our batteries, having more mental clarity, having more patience, more empathy, and also finally having more understanding about how different people function in different ways, and not invalidating others or ourselves because of those differences, and really seeing differences as a source of growth instead of as a source of conflict or as a source of frustration. So that's kind of what we talk about in general in Develop Your Element. But as I said, in this episode, we're going to be focusing on the topic of imposter syndrome. And this week, I'm joined by my mother and my sister, which also are my business partners. Develop Your Element is a bit of a family business. And so let's talk imposter syndrome.
It's a very important topic to look at, because I think a lot of us have probably suffered from it in different areas of our lives, where we're doing something and maybe we're achieving a certain level of success or positive results, but we have difficulty internalizing that. We have difficulty giving ourselves credit for it and celebrating it. So we feel like, oh, we're just lucky, or we're just in the right place at the right time. And since we're not taking any credit for the positive things we're achieving in life, we're always waiting for things to be taken away from us. Yeah. Since luck gave it to me, luck can take it away from me. Since I was just in the right place at the right time, someone eventually is going to discover that I'm not actually qualified, that I'm actually not good enough, and I'll probably lose all of what I have right now. And when you have that, you live with this constant anxiety where you have to try and prove yourself. You have to, be so hard on yourself all the time, because if you're not good enough for this imaginary standard that you don't even know how high it is, then you can lose it. So you're living in fear all the time of, okay, I have to work harder. I have to do this better. I have to not let anyone see this. I have to, you're trying to cover all these bases that maybe aren't relevant, that nobody is probably judging you for.
There has been a study in the States, a very long study, and they found out that 7 out of 10 people have suffered at least in a moment of their lives from this imposter syndrome. And I can tell you, if you have been following us, the first episodes, I was so self-conscious about my accent that I would stumble on words that I use every day. I could not find the words, and I will be so fearful of making a mistake that I made more mistakes. Yeah. I was not fluent. I kept finding mistakes with every word I said. Till Yannick had to say, stop apologizing. You keep apologizing. Just do it. And as soon as I just really internalized that and started doing it, it is not perfect. My English is not perfect. But I was able to communicate in a way that people could understand.
The irony is that she has taught English literature at top universities around the world and has a lot of experience speaking English primarily. We lived 7 years in Canada. But yeah, sure. It's not her native tongue, so there's going to be a bit of an accent. But in terms of vocabulary and pronunciation, people understand. It's sure they can tell that she's from a different place. But it's true. The same happened to me. In reverse, with me it was the Spanish side, because for me English was the language that has been the main constant in my life. Yes, I also have an accent because I didn't grow up in an English-speaking country. I only moved to a English-speaking country at the age of 15 or 16. But before that, I spoke English at home because my mother, her native tongue, Spanish, my father, Danish, and the common denominator, English. So, I did grow up with English being the main constant. And if you ask me, what's your kind of dominant language, it's English. Yeah. And when we first posted our advertisement, when we were launching the podcast, the first thing we got were kind of discriminatory comments about our accents and that we should learn English before we should launch the podcast. And I was like, okay, so if I have to learn English to do this podcast, I'm a little screwed because my Spanish is worse, my Danish is worse.
Japanese.
She lived a lot in Japan and also speaks Japanese. But for all of us, I think English is definitely, if we can't get through something in English, we would be screwed in any other language. But yeah, it was very funny. We got some comments and it did affect us to some degree, but we also just laughed it off. It was like, really? Now you're nitpicking. But
no, and that's the problem. Sometimes we expect perfection. And often, perfection doesn't exist. Yeah. So we are always behind. Yeah. We are not good enough. And that sense of not being good enough, I think, permeates a lot of us in some areas of our lives.
No, and the thing is, we live in a society where we've kind of learned culturally to criticize things in order to make them better. We think that if we point out everything that's wrong in someone, be it ourselves or someone else, that's the only way they're going to improve. And we don't learn how to show positive examples. We don't learn how to compliment the good things and encourage the good things. We just learn, okay, criticize all the bad, find all the bad, and probably it should get better. But then,
or the other way around, where you say, it's wonderful, you're perfect, you're so beautiful, and you are not really
self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation about self-awareness, really, what you're getting into, and it's an important one. Whenever we talk about personal growth, personal development, which is kind of a common denominator across all our episodes, it's essential to explore being self-aware and what it means to be self-aware and what steps we can take to become more self-aware. But self-awareness is not going to either extreme, because yes, you can be aware of your flaws and you can be aware of your strengths, but you're not fully self-aware unless you're looking at both sides. Because yes, I know people who are super self-critical, super like, how shall I say, they're really, really experts in critiquing themselves to the degree of feeling like a failure. And I also know people who are delusional, who feel like they are perfect at everything they do. And I actually don't think they truly feel that way, but that's what they communicate and that's what they reinforce because of their insecurities. That's my theory. But I know people who are like that, who are very good at defending themselves, justifying every action, and who cannot take any level of criticism and don't want to grow. So I've seen both sides, and neither are healthy. But when we're talking about imposter syndrome, what we're really talking about is, yes, it's good to be self-aware, but when you're critiquing yourself, be fair. I mean, be fair. And like, yes, I mean, here at the office, here at Develop Your Element, obviously we have a million reasons to feel like imposters. Every time we take a new step, every time we launch a new product, every time we try something new, it's scary. This podcast thing, we're still figuring it out. I mean, we're 20 episodes in, and I mean, today we had to rush to the store to get a cable because one of the cables is, well, 2 stores. Yeah, we divided and conquered. But yeah, we had to go to 2 stores to find a cable this morning, and like, we still, to execute the podcast or to execute anything we do, I mean, when I go on stage, I'm still shaking, and I've spoken in front of huge groups. But like the last time I was on stage in front of 500 people, I was like shaking, and I was like, and the first words that came out of my mouth, it was like, I must admit, I'm kind of nervous. Bear with me. And I've done talks for a couple of years now, 3 kind of. But yeah, it's something normal. It's something that, as my mother mentioned, statistically speaking, most people suffer from it in some moment of their lives. And yes, it's something that even some of the most successful entrepreneurs, some of the most successful singers, some of the most successful actors, they feel like an imposter. They feel like they just got lucky and their luck is going to run out. They feel like they've just kind of been winging it and they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that feeling can really stay with a person for a long time. And that's where, sadly, in the age of social media, we tend to look at subscribers, we tend to look at followers, we tend to look at those things as the main source of validation, when really some of the people with most subscribers in the world might not have that interesting content. I'm not going to criticize them because obviously they have some amazing abilities of putting themselves out there and editing cool stuff, but you might not have any subscribers and you might have something valuable to share with the world. And yes, it's going to be an uphill battle. It still is for us. I mean, we're still in the early days, and we're honest about it, but before it would stop us from producing stuff. Now, despite having those feelings of insecurity, despite having those feelings of, ooh, like, are they going to take me seriously? Are they going to listen to me? Like, are they going to care about what I have to say? Like, despite having those feelings, we still show up. And that's the important thing. I mean, the key is showing up. The key is not removing all fears. You know, fears are natural, fears are healthy. We mentioned this in many episodes. I mean, it's a survival instinct. We have fears because it can sometimes save our lives. Yes, nowadays, most of the fears that people have are maybe a little unrealistic or unfair and unhealthy, but there are healthy fears. There are fears that can save our lives, that can help us
Absolutely.
not make an impulse choice that affects us for the rest of our lives, you know? And so I'm not saying get rid of all your fears, but what we are trying to explore is this feeling of how can you make imposter syndrome less important than your actual goals.
Yeah.
We talk a lot in developed element, make your goals more important than your fears. It's not that you shouldn't have fears. A healthy dose of fear is important. I mean, for example, the first time I got to speak on a big stage in front of hundreds of people, I had so much imposter syndrome, so much fear, that it helped me level up. It helped me improve the quality of my presentation, of how I communicated the content that I wanted to share. When I didn't have so many people and so much pressure, when it was like 100 to 150 people, I would just kind of wing it. But when I reached a certain point, it was like, ooh, now there's so many people watching. Now I need to level up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a choice we make. We can either choose to level up or to, make an excuse to cancel. I remember when the first time I got invited on TV, I tried everything possible to run. Luckily, the network, they were like, it's not live, so if you mess up, it's okay, we can re-record, like, don't worry, there's no pressure. And they were really good at helping me. And sadly, looking back, there have been many opportunities that I've had, really big speaking gig, media gigs, that I kind of shot myself in the foot because I just felt like an imposter, didn't feel ready.
Yeah.
And looking back, some of my proudest moments are more so than the achievements, the choices I've made when I felt insecure and actually showed up.
Yeah.
That's key. And really, I think every day we are bombarded with reasons why we should give up.
Yeah.
It can be sometimes a financial rough patch in the business. Sometimes it can be a downturn in viewers or listeners. Sometimes it can be a relative telling us how we're doing everything wrong, and then we give so much weight to it, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe that person is right. Maybe they know us more than other people. And like suddenly, like, even when you're in a rhythm, sometimes an event or situation can break that rhythm, and then it's a matter of getting back on track.
Yeah.
No, there are all these triggers we have that even if we are very successful, that little event when you were 5 years old that you haven't healed, and somebody says something similar, and you're suddenly back to 5 years old.
Yeah.
And wanting to hide under the table.
No, the thing is, if somebody's able to speak directly to the insecurities that we have, it's going to hit harder.
Yeah.
And that's where, life, this isn't about, okay, get rid of all your insecurities completely, but it is be self-aware enough to work on them and to start looking at, okay, I have this insecurity, but what am I going to do about it? What can I do to start improving, to start healing, to feel better about myself, to give myself more validation, whatever it is you need, so that doesn't affect you as much. It might still be there, but you're not going to be 100% under its control.
I want to share a personal story. A year ago, as many of you have heard, my father got really sick. And I didn't take it very well. It really put me in bed with depression. And I started having to examine what is it about it, because he has had cancer before. I have let him go before. What is it that is hitting me so hard now? And one of the things was that people had a lot of opinions of how I'm a healer, and I travel all over the world, charge a lot of money for what I do, and I could not heal my father. How other people had the other point of view that I travel all the time and I left him alone, not recognizing that that's exactly what he was asking for, you know? And looking at all that, I realized that what I fear the most is that people thought I was a bad daughter. And that was, I wasn't sure I was a good daughter. And the funny thing is, my father adored me. My father every single day told me how happy and what a good daughter I was. Every day he would say, whenever I would be sad for leaving, he would say, I know that wherever you are smiling and making people happy. And whenever I miss you, I know you have this big smile wherever you go, because I'm always smiling, according to him. And he would say those things, but still I didn't internalize
for context of all his children, my mother is the one that was there the most with him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, no contest.
Yeah.
No contest. In his last few years, my mother of the children is the one that has been there the most.
Yeah, and that's where, if you're not internalizing those positive things, you don't create a solid enough base in your identity to be able to confront those criticisms, because all of us are going to be criticized for something. We're too much of this, or we're not enough of this, or we're too loud, or we're too quiet, or, people are going to find things to pick on. But if we have a certain base where we recognize, okay, yes, I'll listen to that person, but let me look at it, and let me look at it critically. Actually, I've been there in this moment. Actually, I've done well in this moment. Actually, I've achieved this. Is there room for growth? Of course. There's always room for growth.
Yeah.
But I also have these good things about me that I can rely on. When you have that, then you don't crumble. You can be aware of your flaws without it breaking you down.
But the secret is looking at it in the face. And until that moment, until I was really in bed, not wanting to get out, not showering. And if you know me, I love to shower. It's one of my pleasures, something that regenerates me a lot is going to the bath. And where I was, I had the biggest bathtub ever. And I had the flowers, I had the bath bombs, everything. And I would not go in. So that told me there's something really wrong, you know. And it was there that I really had two choices. Either I really go full depression and lock myself, and I have a good story behind it, because my father, the hero of my life, the person that always believed in me, is dying, or I wake up and I do something about it.
Yeah.
And it took me a few days,
Yeah.
And that's okay too, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes we need periods of really processing and internalizing. I mean, for context, her father, my grandfather, just passed away a few weeks ago. We're still mourning. We're still having a tough time every single day. I mean, it has hit us hard, and it's been a process. And what we're doing here at the office is we're telling people, listen, just be patient with us. We're going to be a little bit slower than usual. We're not going to have the same mental clarity and productivity as usual. No. Just bear with us during this period. We're going to get back on track as fast as possible. We're still going to show up. We're still going to do things. But just understand, it's not going to be with the same impact and the same. Exactly. It's gonna. You're gonna need to push us and challenge us a little bit, and be patient with us as well. You know, a healthy balance of those things. And we've had to share that with this brings up the conversation of context. Context is key. We have a whole episode on context. We talk a lot about context and development. Context is all the factors, variables, situations, things, experiences that influence any thought, action, or dynamic. And really, context is key. I'll give you an example. My uncle, who we recently saw, who's a successful entrepreneur now, but for most of his year, he wasn't successful. He gained success after the age of 50. He got a business going, and I'm happy he's doing well, but he decided to judge my business based on his business, and so he chose to compare his context to my context, but without making the distinction of our individual contexts. So he told me exactly how he started his business, how he ran his business, and how I should basically do the same, without asking any questions or trying to understand what's my context, what are my priorities, what are my experiences, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are my fears, what are my resources, how's the team. Like, he didn't try to understand anything. He just started explaining to me why his way of doing things is better than my way of doing things. And for a minute there, I started believing him. And I started listening, and I was like, oh, yeah, maybe he is right. Maybe I suck at this. Maybe this is right. Maybe. And I was like, wait a minute. very different contexts, very, very different situations. I appreciate the feedback, but am I going to put a lot of weight on it? Maybe not. He's had success in an area that I have no interest in. He had success at the age of 50. I have no interest in being 50 and only then being a successful entrepreneur. I say that because him and I, we don't necessarily always get along too well. And yeah, sure, there's a bit of competitive spirit as well. And you can choose to do one out of two things. I mean, either you can let it invalidate you and you can feel like shit, or you can be like, okay, well, he doesn't believe in me. I'm going to prove him wrong. I mean, you can do one of those two things. So if you hear a little bit of competitive kind of spirit in what I say, it's because I made a conscious choice of, okay, I'm not going to let him invalidate me, but I don't mind proving him wrong a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But context is key, because many times people judge from the outside without having enough information.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get advice from people who don't have enough information. And sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's the fault of the other person. It can be the fault of the other person when they have no interest in knowing. For example, with my uncle, he doesn't let you speak. When he is in one of his speeches of how you got to do everything differently, you can't even get a word in. So there's no opportunity to share your context, to educate him on what really is going on, so that he can help with a more kind of tailored approach. However, sometimes we ourselves are too private and we don't share enough. And we assume people are mind readers. We assume people know our context. Yeah. And they don't. And even here at the office, for me, this has been a big challenge. Obviously, we have a bilingual office. We have people who speak Spanish, people who speak English. And we obviously have many other languages that we cover and teams across the world. And there is fragmentation in communication, whether I like it or not. I take many steps to reduce fragmentation, but yes, sometimes one team or one team member or knows something that another team member or one language knows something and a different team of a different language doesn't know things. And we've had a lot of frustrating situations where arguments, discussions, criticisms have come up because we didn't take enough time and enough steps to make sure that everyone on the team, across all the different languages, across all the different sub-teams,
and time schedules, because people work at different...
Who's in the office? Like, sometimes the people who were in the office in the morning know, but then in the afternoon they might not know, and the people in the morning assume that the people in the afternoon know. So that's something that can be pretty challenging. So one thing that kind of I want to emphasize when we talk about imposter syndrome, yes, something that influences our imposter syndrome a lot is criticisms, is either external validation or external criticism. And you need a healthy dose of both, because the criticism will help you grow and improve your product or service, and your cheerleaders will help you feel good about yourself. And hopefully you have a mix of both sides around you. If you have either extreme, you're missing out. But you gotta explore how to make sure that you're getting that healthy dose, and you gotta take conscious steps to communicate your context to people. You gotta take conscious steps to make sure that you filter the noise and you ask yourself, oh, this feedback, is this from that person's insecurities, that person's past experiences? A lot of what my uncle shares with me is the mistakes he made at my age, mistakes that I, in many cases, have not made. Sometimes, yes, and it aligns and lucky. Great. Okay, this piece of feedback is relevant because I am going through what you went through. But many times,
it has nothing
to do. Many times, my context and the context of my uncle at my age, totally different. But obviously, the instinct of my uncle is sharing with me what worked for him. And I appreciate it. And I can appreciate and receive it with gratitude without letting it invalidate me. But if I don't have that level of self-awareness, it's very easy to let that invalidate me.
It's because it's poison. I mean, sometimes the advice people give you or the criticism they give you is poison. They really leave you with all these
doubts,
and they try to press all your buttons.
Yeah.
Why? Because they might be feeling insecure. Because they might want you to avoid the mistakes like your uncle. Whatever the reason, sometimes the way they do it fills you with all these poison in your head that if you're not self-aware, if you don't have the tools to quiet that noise, it really corrodes you inside. And I see it sometimes. How many people, and I saw it in university, so many people trying to do the perfect essay, to do the perfect answer. And they would be so focused on that sometimes they even forgot the question. They forgot their analysis. They forgot their personality. And I had to sit my students and say, listen, that's not the way the world works. I'm not expecting something so perfectly written that looks like somebody else wrote it. I want you to express yourself. I want you to start learning what you think and communicate it, because that's more important. And they are so scared of making a mistake that they erase their personality, they erase their desires, they erase their thoughts to copy somebody that they think is successful and has done it right.
That's actually a very good point. One of the challenges and conversations sometimes we have at the office is finding that balance between kind of personal identity and way of being and a certain level of professionalism and certain industry standards and how you package things and how you communicate things. And one thing that I've noticed is sometimes I tend to personally go a little bit more formal. Most of the times you will see me in suits or at least in a blazer. Today I'm actually only in a dress shirt, but it's a dress shirt. For many people that's maybe too formal. The way I speak, sometimes I choose bigger words. And there has been conversations and I've gotten feedback and we've kind of explored sometimes my word choices. And sometimes, yes, sometimes it's the right word I choose because it's the best word to describe what I'm trying to communicate. And sometimes it might not be the best word, but I might be doing it because I think it makes me sound smarter. And I might choose a word because it gives me some level of internal validation, but then I get the feedback that, that word choice is maybe not the most natural. People are not going to understand it, or they're not going to identify themselves with you because they're going to think you're a pretentious dick. Those kind of journeys of self kind of awareness, exploration, and all that sort of stuff, they're important because yes, I remember in the early days, like right now it's small little word choice, small little details. As a whole, I think I found a pretty good way of being me, but also being natural. But in the early days when I first started, it was a mess. I would grow my beard way longer than I really like. I would have my hair longer and slick back so I would look older so that people would be less likely to judge me based on my baby face or my perceived baby face, because it's not as much of a baby face as it was a few years ago. But still, I have this feeling that no one will take me seriously if they see me. It has not really been an issue. So now I have shaved, now I have cut my hair, now I can kind of be more natural, and I can dress more casually sometimes without feeling like I need to overcompensate.
Yeah.
And something that happened is when I moved to Canada, I saw a lot of ageism. In Europe, especially Northern Europe, people become adults very early on. I mean, there's a lot of empowerment and trust with youth. And like when it comes to drinking, exploration of sexuality, when it comes to
transport,
jobs, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to safety, when it comes to just an open dialogue about things, the northern part of Europe is very natural, very, you grow up and you become an adult. I mean, I felt like an adult at the age of 13. I felt that empowered by the society, by the culture, by my peers, by my teachers. But when I got to Canada at the age of 16, I think, I felt like I was treated like a kindergarten kid. And then I started dressing more formally. I started dressing in suits. I started dressing in things so that I would be treated more as an adult. And some of it because I do like dressing well. I do like more formal stuff. And part of it is mine. Part of it is really what I feel most comfortable in. But there was also a level of insecurity of me overcompensating for my insecurities. And now I found kind of smart casual, like I can wear jeans with a blazer and, find that middle point that's kind of comfortable for me. But for a long time, it was really hard for me to do that. For a long time, it was like, oh no, I'm just going to go over, like I'm going to overdress for every event. And people can perceive that. People can see right through that, and you don't have the same impact as when you're a natural. And also, even if you do choose to overdress, and sometimes I do it today, but with confidence instead of insecurity, and then people will perceive the same action very differently.
Oh, absolutely.
Before, when I overdressed because of insecurity, people could feel that I felt small. Now, if I overdress just because I want to have an impact and because I want to provoke and I want to have fun, like it's very different. They like it. They laugh. It's like, and like sometimes it's a running joke. Like I can be in Rio de Janeiro and in Brazil, and I can be wearing a velour blazer, like at 32-degree temperature, and I do it to provoke, for laughs, for giggles, right?
Well, 32
degrees Celsius. Yeah, like 90 something 100 Fahrenheit. I don't know.
Really hot.
I don't know Fahrenheit in Canada and in Europe and in Mexico. Fahrenheit is not, well, in everywhere in the world except for the US, Fahrenheit is no longer a thing. So yeah, I apologize to the Americans for my lack of Fahrenheit knowledge. But yeah, so Steve behind the scenes says, don't apologize for that. I mean, yeah, metric makes more sense. I'm sorry, not sorry. But yeah. So
Actually, I'm not sure metric makes more sense, but well.
It makes a million times more sense. But anyway, that's a whole other episode. Let's start a science program and let's talk about how the metric system makes sense and how, yeah, American never really understood that. But yeah, so moving on. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is we all have this kind of internal struggle with finding our voice, finding our identity, finding who are we. Many people don't know who they are. And in that journey, a lot of people will guide us, will influence us. Some people will criticize us. Some people will tell us how to dress, how to move, how to talk. Sometimes our environment makes us speak way too posh or way too ghetto, or way like it can take us to somewhere that's not ourselves, right? And maybe by finding your voice, some people will criticize you. Yeah. Oh, you're no longer one of us. Like I've seen it on both extremes. I've seen it with. I'm one of those people that I get along with every type of person, and I have friends who are just very laid back, casual. Some people who are kind of more ghetto. Some people who are very posh. And like I'm just kind of natural. One thing in Spanish, it's a real task. Levels of formality, you know, there's a different way of speaking formally and casually. I'm pretty casual. I don't know how to speak up to people. I was raised with treat the janitor and the CEO the same way. So it's sometimes a little bit of a challenge for me. But I do know people who live in those environments that really reinforce this is the way of being. Know your roots. This is and it's like, well, it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Yes, in that space, maybe using certain words and communicating in a certain way will have more impact. But maybe for your goals, long term, reaching more people, maybe something more middle point, kind of more relatable for the kind of mainstream, but it depends on your goals.
Yeah, I think it's a question of looking at why you're doing it, because if you're doing it from a place of, oh, hey, this is going to work, people are going to receive it, and things are going to go smoother if I do it this way, great. But if you're doing it from a place of, I'm wrong if I don't, I'm awful if I don't, then you're going to live with a certain level of stress and tension, and you're not going to allow yourself to explore anything that's outside of that.
And if we are inviting people to grow up, I think it's fair to sometimes challenge them with a word here or an idea here that they haven't experienced. Yeah. Because if we have to go to their level, sometimes we go to the minimum denominator, common denominator, and going down is not our aspiration. But all depends what you want to do and the effect you want to have in the world. And word choice, energy, dressing up, whatever it is, you have to take that into account, knowing what is your long-term goal and your short-term goals, that we talk about it also here. We have a podcast about that.
The reality is you have to ask yourself, are you doing this because of fear of rejection? Or are you doing this because it's more likely to take you to where you want to be?
Yeah.
Because obviously in politics you have to speak very differently than you have to speak in, let's say you're a rapper. If you're a rapper, you're going to speak very different than if you're a politician, right? I love rap. I love politics. Not all of politics. Sometimes I get very annoyed by politics, like most people. But like, good politics. Good politics, interesting. But like, obviously, we have to ask who's our audience. And in developed development, we talk about that a lot from the perspective of personality psychology, but also in terms of economic standing, also in terms of culture, society. What are the norms in this culture? Sometimes stepping out of comfort zone and communicating in a way that audience will receive and understand has more impact.
Of course.
But there's also a reality of if you do something that people perceive as fake, as in you trying too hard, they're not gonna listen.
No.
So like, if I try to speak all ghetto, like, people are probably gonna look at me and be like, yep, nope, that's a whole lot of nope, I'm not buying it, nope.
No,
It's
it's like when your parents are trying to be cool by using all the slang that they don't
Oh,
actually
yeah.
know
Oh,
how
yeah.
to use, or they're trying to talk about Twitter without really knowing how Twitter works.
Yeah.
It's very different from them just being open, honest, and approachable.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
And when we're
I love
talking-
that example because how often we sound fake, and it's okay to ask. I don't understand. I mean, I'm trying to go this on this direction. I'm going to educate myself, but I'm not an expert on it. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's not just parents. I'm 29. And
Steve, come to the mic and share.
I'm 29 and I don't
You look
know
handsome.
So Steve is saying from behind the scenes, if you can't hear him, he's saying, I'm 29, and trust me, I don't know all the new vocabulary, like words like lit and things like, I don't get it. It's
And yeet.
sometimes he'll purposely say it to make people cringe, and he uses it kind of in a playful way.
No,
But they're not part of his main vocabulary.
I do a thing where I like to follow meme accounts on the internet run by 14-year-olds because that's where all the new slang is coming up, and then I figure it out before everyone else my age.
And
I have no clue. Yes, let me say.
just to bring back, like, this is very relevant to the topic of imposter syndrome, but I just want to clarify why. So, when we're talking about feeling like an imposter, what is the first thing that happens? Either we invalidate ourselves and give up, or we try to be something we are not to fit in or to receive a certain approval.
Yeah.
And yes, when we're insecure, we don't have the confidence to be original. And that's where we reinforce, or to be a real this, we have to be this. Like, you see the Instagram accounts, to be a proper lady, to be a good man, or to be a, or in hip hop, real hip hop is this, or
Every music genre.
like
What?
Every music genre does that.
yeah, I like hip hop a lot. Rock, metal, whatever genre. There's gonna be people who are elitist, and it's cool if you're know your history and stuff. But music is always innovating. There's always new stuff, and it's always changing. Whether you like it or not, the music today is very different from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, from 15 years ago. And yes, there are people who like the old style and do it very well and honor it and really do a homage to that, and that's great. But there's always going to be new stuff. And the innovators obviously were criticized and critiqued for, no, you're not real, you're not this, you're not that. But many times it's the ones that are willing to take the risks and explore what's going to be the new thing, or defining what the new thing, are often the ones that have more success than the ones that kind of hold on to the previous kind of more traditional genre. It's not always the case. There are people who do old school really well. There are people who do indie very well, underground very well. There's space for everything in this world. But you're going to find where you're going to have most input. And yes, different contexts mean that the people who like your genre, your style, are going to love you. But people who have a different opinion, a different set of priorities, they're going to maybe hate you or criticize you. Like, for example, with Steve, we both like hip-hop and can end up speaking a lot about hip-hop. And for a long time, we had a hard time seeing eye to eye on things because he has had more of the, the old school, the underground. And while I certainly can appreciate and value that, I'm often like the new school. And like sometimes there's been debates. And now we've kind of come to really a cool point where we have enough confidence to be able to appreciate and value people, like artists of every single style, without invalidating, oh no, that's not real hip-hop, but in the beginning, when we were talking about our likes and dislikes, there would be a lot of kind of competitive nature of like, I have to explain and justify why my opinion is the best. And when we talk about personal identity, understand, not everyone is going to like you. Not everyone is going to appreciate your craft. Not everyone is going to understand you. There is space for everything in this world. You can be an artist or of any type of style, and there's going to be someone who's going to appreciate your style, but you're going to have more success if you're true to yourself. Yes, being willing to grow, being willing to experiment, being willing to innovate, and not being static or stagnant. But, and yes, collaborate with people of different styles. That's going to enrich you as well. We talk about how diversity enriches projects if you don't let insecurities get in the way, but really ask yourself, how can these differences help you grow? But really, if you're feeling like an imposter, you probably haven't found your audience, or you're marketing to the wrong audience. Because yes, if I share this podcast in the wrong Facebook group, or in the wrong WhatsApp group in Latin America, I'll probably get a lot of criticism. But if I share it in the right one, I probably will get cheered on a lot. And that's something that you have to understand. Imposter syndrome, taking into account context, and people's individual contexts will influence whether or not they will appreciate you or criticize you.
And it will be the same in your family. I mean,
And
you
your
will
family
have
as well,
people that are more empathetic, more willing to see and value the differences, and some that really like to invalidate. So be aware that anywhere you go, there will be people that invalidate, and not always out of meanness. Most often it's out of fear, or they've been brainwashed, you know, and they think, oh, this is the only possibility and nothing outside this limitation is valid. And it's a very easy way of living, in a way, because a way of not growing and not challenging yourself. Because if you start saying, this is the only valid thing, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to listen to them. If they don't speak perfectly, I'm not going to listen to them. If they don't use the right words, or if they don't dress the way I like it, I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to pay attention. They are not going to be ready to learn anything.
And that's where, if we sort of bring it back to this conversation about self-awareness, when you're recognizing your flaws, your weaknesses, your challenges, it's not about judging yourself and beating yourself up for it. It's so that you have information to grow with.
Exactly.
If you use it as information to grow with, oh, look, I have this weakness. What can I do about it? Who can I collaborate with? What can I Google? What can I learn? How can I grow? Then it's very different from, I have this weakness. I'm so wrong. I'm so wrong. I'm so wrong.
Yeah, this Alvaro, one of the Mexican instructors, shared he's hiring somebody in his work, and he uses the elements to get to know the people. And one of the persons identified 3 elements, and when he asked, what do you hate about, or what do you dislike about people, it was characteristics of the 3 elements
That he identified with.
He had identified with. And he was shocked, and I said, oh, it happened to me. I mean, I received so much criticism from my mom, well-meaning criticism, to be more like her, that what I'm most naturally is something called earthly. That is a person that really thinks things through, takes other people into account. That she really thought slow people down. It made them weaker or something. And she tried to advise me. Oh, she advised me strongly not to be like that. So I learned that was wrong. And it was not my mother's intentions ever to invalidate me. She was trying to empower me to be more like what she found to work for her. So also take that into account when you are criticizing yourself. Go to our first podcast where we talk about the personalities. See what works for you and how you can develop that side of you so it doesn't come out the wrong way or in the wrong time. How to develop your own, the elements that compose your personality so you can become the best you, the best version of you. Because it has helped me a lot. Many things I hated about myself. Many things I really criticized. And that's why I love Develop Your Element. I learned that it was not wrong. I just didn't know how to use it. I didn't know how to regenerate it to be in my optimal state.
That's a really good point, because sometimes it can be really difficult to see value in ourselves when we receive so much criticism or we criticize ourselves so much. So sometimes looking at other people who have certain similarities to us and seeing it as positive in them can help us reflect on it as positive in ourselves. I know for me, on my introverted side, I would feel really insecure about being introverted because I have a primarily extroverted family that talks a lot, moves a lot, is always having projects and doing things. And I liked being in my room and reading by myself. And, you know, I would feel like I was broken or that I didn't function socially, which, yes, there's also something to that that's separate from just being introverted that I had going on. But I really just felt like I wasn't good enough because I wasn't extroverted. And when I started making other extroverted friends and started seeing how nice it is to hang out with an introvert, how peaceful it is, how calm it can be, and seeing their skills and hearing how they think and really learning to admire them, suddenly I was able to see, oh, that's something I'm able to be for other people too.
Exactly.
So there isn't just one way of being a good person or good at something or nice or, you know, things like that.
This is a good segue. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, go ahead.
This is a good segue into talking about the basics of personality psychology and imposter syndrome. Introverts, they think,
Overthink.
analyze, verify before they talk. Extroverts, they think out loud, so they speak until they develop the idea far enough for it to be good.
Mm-hmm.
So they might be sharing a bunch of not so interesting stuff on their path to get to the interesting stuff. We have different routes, right? And basically this means for introverts, their way of finding their voice, their way of getting on stage, their way of beating imposter syndrome, because they will have a natural imposter syndrome until they find the answers, they verify, they become experts or masters in their topic. They will naturally feel like an imposter.
Mm-hmm.
The key for them is, yes, confidence through mastery. Lots of practice, lots of research, data, facts, information that prepares them to be able to answer any question, any doubt, to really be able to deal with any objection there might be. Extroverts, they're a little bit more they're a little bit more agile and a little bit more socially confident, but we have to be very careful with that, because there's something called shyness that's different than introversion, and shyness can affect extroverts.
Yeah.
Shyness is the fear of judgment, and even an extrovert will have moments of insecurities where they will act like an introvert, or where they will have a foot in mouth moment, say something out loud, share it, and then judge themselves heavily afterwards. I'm primarily an extrovert. I'm an ambivert leaning to extrovert, meaning I'm not super extroverted, but I am quite extroverted, especially compared to my sister. So I have been known to think out loud, overshare. I have no secrets, basically. I just kind of blurb things as they come to my head. And as a result, I have obviously been critiqued and criticized, and I've learned how to improve my communication and really think and analyze and develop certain skill sets that maybe weren't as natural. Like, I've always been very analytical, but I would analyze out loud, and sometimes that would devalue the process. So for different personalities, something important to understand is introverts, yes, analyze, verify, but also at some point make the choice of, okay, now it's good enough, like
To say something.
to you know, like, get out there.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to extroverts, yes, sometimes slowing down and analyzing, verifying can be very good, but also when we talk about personality psychology, there are two conversations that have to be had. One is leveraging your natural skill sets and abilities, and one is developing your areas of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So introverts leverage the fact that you have an ability to become an expert on something, learn the facts, learn the finer intricacies very well, and develop the ability to step out of your comfort zone a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
Extroverts, yes, leverage the fact that you have an easier time speaking openly about things, but also take the time to maybe develop and verify the things you're saying a little more, because you'll have more impact. Thus, you'll get more external validation. You'll feel better about yourself, and as a whole, you'll grow better. So, yes, leverage what you're good at, but develop the area that you might be a little weak on.
And what do you say about ambiverts? We care so much about other people that their opinion is so important that sometimes we lose ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think for ambiverts, we cannot please everybody. And that's one of the things that will affect us most. So what do we do?
Yeah, no, I think understanding that you don't have to agree to respect each other, to value each other, to love each other can go a long way. Because when we talk about ambiverts in the context of develop your element, we're talking about people whose primary way of being is very much in the middle. It's people who are very dedicated to interpersonal relationships. And so they'll have a tendency to want to agree with the people that they care about because they want a good relationship. They want the other person to be happy. They want to see the smiles on the faces of the people they love. So understanding that you can disagree, you can have your own opinions, you can have your own identity and still have positive relationships, I think that can go a long way in not losing yourself completely for a relationship.
And I want to share what happened to me. When my children were growing up and Yannick was officially going to Hawaii and Itzel went to Japan, my mother died. I was
going to move to Hawaii to study because I got a scholarship.
Scholarship.
That didn't happen.
He stayed to help me take care of my mom that had cancer. So anyway, they were becoming independent and I had made my life to be the mother, to be the wife. I was a professor too. And suddenly I'm neither professor nor mother nor nothing. I'm in Mexico taking care of my mother. Like a 10-year-old, again, my mother was sick since I was very young. So I was there doing the same things as a small girl. And I had to start finding out what Berenice wanted, you know. And it was a process. And I had to annoy a lot of people. But I had very clear what we say about earthly people. We talk about earthly people that is an ambivert that they say in the airplanes, put the oxygen mask first on you so you can help everybody else. And I was so depleted after my mother died that I had no clue who I was. Yeah. I had no clue what I wanted in life. I actually became a professor because my ex-husband was a professor. I mean, well, I was a lecturer, if you want to be exact. In Canada, they call them professor, anybody who teaches in university. Anyway, so I really was so low in my life. I had to first put myself first. And I know a lot of people. But I will tell you something. What happened to me, and I realized that when I became me, I found nicer people. I found people that had criticized me on my path to finding myself, that really had got annoyed, that really had said awful words. Suddenly realizing, oh, she's looking prettier. She's looking younger. She's looking happier. She's doing something. I want to find out what she's doing. And actually, this morning, somebody wrote to me that was one of my biggest critics. She has said the most awful things in the world. And today we were talking and she was, you're such an inspiration to me. And I was like, what? Okay. You? From all people, I nearly blocked you on Facebook a few times, you know. But it took her, I don't know how many years, 5 years to come along. So let me just say that when you go through your search of who you are, when you start really getting out of the imposter syndrome and really starting to look who you are so you can change those flaws you have, so you can find what excites you, what motivates you, so you can break through that syndrome. There will be people that might not like you because they cannot control you anymore, because they cannot put you in the little box. Just keep going, because eventually things will turn. And when you are you, it's so beautiful to wake up in the morning. It's so beautiful to go out because it's no longer an effort. Yeah. It's so beautiful. And then you become an inspiration to other people that you might not even realize
Yeah.
So it's worth going through it.
Yeah, no, because everything you do, you'll do it very different when you actually value yourself and have a certain level of confidence. It goes back to what we were saying about how sometimes when we're overcompensating, things come across as fake.
Yeah.
When we have that constant fear and anxiety about, am I good enough? I'm probably doing it wrong. I'm probably messing up. We are going to mess up more because we're stressing ourselves out. We're draining ourselves. We're so depleted that we don't have the energy levels to make the best choices in the moment. So by giving ourselves a bit more self-worth and by starting to recognize positive things about ourselves, we start being able to fill up our tank again. We start being able to regenerate and recharge again. And then we have more to work with. We'll have more of those intangible resources like mental clarity, emotional clarity, and so on, to be able to make better choices and have better results in our lives.
Yeah.
The reality is something I want to emphasize here a bit. In developed development, we try to never be one size fits all, right? And we understand people have different personalities and contexts, and that's kind of a common thread across all the stuff we talk about. And when it comes to imposter syndrome, different people are gonna have different challenges. You know, they're gonna be people who are gonna delay and procrastinate. Watch our episode on procrastination. We really go into many different things that influence someone to procrastinate. Most of them are fears or lack of information and such. But like, maybe you procrastinate. Maybe you shoot yourself in the foot. Maybe you do things but overcompensating in a non-natural way, and you have the opposite impact of what you want to have. One thing that I want to kind of communicate a little bit and share with you guys, there's this trendy thing right now on the internet that people talking about the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. And it can be applied to almost anything in a million different ways. This is just a general concept and a general guideline. It's not like a scientific fact, but it helps a lot of people. And it goes basically that 20% of the input creates 80% of the results. Or 20% of the workers produce 80% of the results. Or 20% of the customers create 80% of the revenue. Or 20% of the bugs cause 80% of the crashes. Or 20% of the features cause 80% of the usage of a and this helps us not try to perfect 100% of what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's okay. So yes, with any project, there's so many things that are gonna require our attention. So many things that we're not gonna be happy with. We talk about in developed development. In this podcast, we've mentioned it a lot. You know, and this is in entrepreneurship as a whole. You know, you gotta launch things at some point, and there's a reason why in entrepreneurship they talk about an MVP. Launch your minimum viable product, and then, you know, if people are responding to it, then invest more in it, then improve it, then fix it, then add more you know, improve the product. But don't wait till it's perfect to launch. Launch it when it's good enough that people will use it, and then get some feedback. And yes, you can launch it with a discount. You can do a promotion. You know, you can do a beta test. You can do different things, but get it out there, and then improve and improve and improve. But this 80-20 rule, it helps a lot to understand. You know, I'm nitpicking on 100% of this, and as long as this 20%, you know, the most important stuff is good, then most people are not gonna nitpick on this other 80%. And if I get this right, then yes, little by little I can improve those parts.
How many babies?
What did I say?
As long as 20% is good, people won't care about the other 80%.
No, it is correct.
It is correct.
20% of the features make up 80% of the usage.
Okay.
So as long as 20% is good, then you can gradually improve the other 80. It doesn't mean you shouldn't improve the other 80. A lot of products, lots of services have failed because they didn't improve.
But how many
people
of
have more
us?
patience than the beginning.
How many of us were launched before time? I don't think any of the parents of anybody of you studied to be a parent.
Sure.
So
A handful might have, but
No?
no, a handful might have, because there are some parents that study
okay,
everything.
I actually, I'm a Montessori teacher. I specialized on trouble kids, or I don't know, it was something that probably you cannot say nowadays. But I did read all the books, including Dr. Spock and whatever, and read all the magazines. I read my children were born in Holland, so I read Dutch magazines on childcare, British magazines because I had lived in Britain before, Spanish and American, and the American forces give you a book on kids care. I had that too. They are not in agreement.
Yeah.
Just let me say that. But I read them all. And still, the baby comes out and you have no clue what you're doing. Seriously, no matter how much I had studied and how expert I was, I had no clue.
And we say this all the time in developed development. If you're not failing, you're not innovating, you're not stepping out of your comfort zone. If you're not doing things that you're not prepared for, it means that you're staying in your comfort zone. If you're not being rejected, you're not putting yourself out there. If you're not failing, you're not innovating. You're just stuck doing the stuff that you feel comfortable with. And that is not sustainable, because with any business, with any project, you have to innovate because things become irrelevant faster than you can imagine.
You have no idea how many days I cried and thought, oh my God, what I have got myself into. I have this little thing. Now they are totally depending on me, and I have no clue. I don't even have a clue how to live my own life. How am I going to guide them? You know.
Yeah.
Now with the kittens, we have. If you saw last week's episode, somebody left a box outside the door of the office with 2 kittens, and it was the same. I had never taken care of kittens. I have allergy to cats, so now I'm taking care of kittens, and often I'm like that, in the same feeling I had when my children were born, when I have launched some products. Oh my God, I'm not prepared for this. I'm not prepared for this, you know. Yeah. They had fleas. They were separated 1 month before they should have been separated. So they don't know how to clean themselves. They really needed a lot of attention the first few days. Now we went to the vet, and the vet couldn't believe how good they are doing. But we will have those moments. Yeah. And I think in a way it's healthy, because it's like a wake-up call. Maybe I can study. I can learn a little more. You know, keep developing instead of locking yourself. I mean, I did have a moment last week with one of the kittens where I thought it had died, and I was like, no, not another death in my life. I don't want to feel a dead body next to me for a few months at least. So it was like
she's referring to the context of our grandfather.
Yeah, my mother, my father, and somebody I really cared a lot about. Well, still care. Would die constantly? Well, no, one of them would. So that idea of having
die constantly is probably not the right word. Had a health situation where they would basically be on the brink of dying many points.
Yes. Yeah. So I would be lying next to somebody that I had to. Is this person? Is this the moment? So I don't want to go through that for a few months at least. You know. So when it happened with the kitten, it was one of those insecure moments. You know, and you will have them. Yeah. You will have them. The difference is how soon. How well you recover and start looking for a solution instead of hiding. And I mean, we've been hiding. The 3 of us have been introverting a lot, and since my father died, I mean.
And it's fair to hide sometimes, so long as you're not hiding chronically. Because there are times when, especially introverts, but even extroverts, sometimes need to kind of pull themselves away from a situation to recalibrate, or to process, or to rest, or to have a moment of peace and quiet before going on and tackling something. And that's okay. You don't want to beat yourself up during that period, because if you're beating yourself up during that period, you're not taking advantage of it. Yeah. So it can drag on much longer, and you come out of it less recovered. Yeah. But it's a question of looking at things over periods of time. Okay, yes, I have this thing that I'm insecure about, but how is it affecting my life over time? Is it an issue that I need to look at? If yes, then okay, look at it. But if it's not actually causing you issues besides self-judgment, then you also have to be aware of that, because sometimes the biggest issue we're suffering from in a certain area is self-judgment.
Oh, yeah. And I swear, I don't know why we all do it. Oh, a lot of us do it. I know some people that never think of it, but a lot of us are very good at beating ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know if is this perfectionism.
It goes back to this idea that in order to grow and improve, we have to point out the flaws, which we get taught that maybe by our parents, maybe in school, maybe in our workplace. There are certain environments where there are people that in order to make us grow will criticize us. You know, we think, okay, mark all the errors in an essay so that you can fix those errors in the essay, right? And there's a time and place for that, yes. Like, you need to know where the typo is to fix the typo. But we take it to an extreme where it becomes everything in our lives. It's, I have to point out this flaw, and this flaw, and this flaw, and this flaw, and I have to beat myself up for it, because if not, I'm not being responsible.
But, and not only that, I mean, we are always comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, or looking at social media and trying to really keep up with the competition, let's say. It's a very strong instinct that we want to be able to keep up. And the problem is sometimes we won't be able to keep up with someone. I mean, if you're comparing yourself with someone who has different skill sets, different contexts, different priorities, different interests, they will have developed differently, and you're not wrong or less for not being great at what they're great at. Where you really have to, what you really should do is ask yourself and ask the people around you, what am I good at that other people have a hard time with? What can people learn from me? What do I have that I can share with the world? Ask your best friends or the cheerleaders in your life, what am I good at? What do you wish that you could do that I can do? Or what do you feel that I do naturally that other people wish they could do, you know? And a lot of people will be able to tell you that. If you don't have anyone in your life that can tell you that, find new friends. No, don't get rid of the ones, but like maybe expand your social circle to have some people who may be able to help you see that. But you should be able to see that
and receive
yourself.
it, because it's a little like what I share about my dad. My dad will tell me every day. Seriously, I don't think there was a single day that we didn't spend together where he would not tell me how wonderful I was. But in detail, he will say, Berenice, the way you do this, thank you for doing that. You have helped me so much. You have always been here for me. You never this or you never that. You're always there, blah, blah, blah. He had the examples, the words for it. And I let other people's opinions. I gave them more weight than my father every single day, the gratitude. Because if something my father had was gratitude.
And that's another thing. We have to tailor how we perceive ourselves to the specific situation. So in this case, in your relationship with your dad, instead of making your dad's opinion the most important, like your dad's and your opinion the most important about your relationship, you were making other external people's opinions more important. And we do this all the time. Like maybe in school our teachers really like us and appreciate us, but we're listening to what our friends say, to what our relatives say, to what other people say. Or maybe at our job our boss actually kind of likes us, but we're listening to all these other external voices.
Well,
so that's another thing we have to look at. Okay, the people that are actually involved in this situation, what is it that they are saying?
Well, Danny had the worst and most awful math teachers in some countries, and they would say super bad things about him when he was very good at math, and to the point that he stopped being good at math. He loved math, but he had teachers that were, because he moved from Holland to Denmark to Japan to Denmark to Canada. His maths were in different languages, and in different stages he had learned different techniques. So when
sometimes I was ahead, sometimes I was behind, sometimes I didn't have what I like the prerequisites. Like when I moved to Canada, I didn't know what cosine, sine, tangent was, because I went to a business high school in Denmark where the focus was really on more business and accounting type math, more so than algebra and things like that. But also, yes, for example, I learned to divide with long division in Japan, and my teacher in Denmark refused to correct my work if I did long division. I had to do short division. I learned the multiplication table in Japanese and I had to relearn it in Danish, my teacher thought it's just numbers. No, it's a little song you have in your head. Like, at least for me it was. So, like,
And
I
he
had
had
to
to
learn and relearn
and he had to
forget.
think first in Japanese, then
And
translate
translate,
into
yeah.
English, and then into Danish.
Yeah.
And the teacher would not understand those things. So he gave up in maths in many areas
Yeah.
because they didn't understand his context. So also recognize that, please. But I should say that I would not have a wonderful son, an adopted son, I don't know what number he is, but Steve came into our lives because Yannick was bad at math in Canada. And
Yeah, a lot of my friendship with Steve was built upon the fact that we ended up in the same math class, and I don't know how it happened, but he must have pitied me. He must have been like, "Who's this weird foreigner who can't figure out the basics that you need to know for this class?" And then he was like, "No, actually, I'm joking. We had in common computers and a lot of interests, but in other classes we'd had before, we were kind of rivals. We were kind of competing for the teacher's attention. We would sometimes be the clown. It's not the clowns in the class, but we would kind of compete for the attention of the teacher.
the nerds. in
We
the
were the
class.
nerds, and we were also the provocative students in some classes. But when we got to math class, he could very clearly tell my confidence was like nowhere to be seen, and my way of being was just totally different. And we ended up sitting next to each other and talking a little bit. And when he learned how lost I was, he took it upon himself to teach me math enough to pass. I did fail the first semester, had to take a lower level of math to pass, but I passed. Without Steve, I probably wouldn't have passed. Well, I definitely wouldn't have passed.
And Steve,
But
he
he
didn't
would
have
give me positive reinforcement, give me little chocolates and stuff. Every time I got a right answer or did something well. Both when we would sit and study, and in class, if I would have the correct answer, he would sneak like a chocolate behind and pass it to me if I was sitting behind. And yeah, so our friendship was definitely reinforced and deepened a lot because he helped me with math in high school. But and yeah, he's now basically an adopted member of the family, and well, he lives in
the most permanent adopted child.
Yeah,
we have.
so
I think so.
And that's, again, like, if you're not beating yourself, if you're not so busy beating yourself up for your mistakes and your flaws, you can appreciate these moments and these positive things that show up in your life because of them. Because if we're perfect at everything all the time, we're probably not going to build strong relationships because people won't see us as approachable or relatable, and we won't need people in our lives. So a lot of the magic would be lost in life. It's kind of like when you look at a lot of art, like when you have certain flaws in an artwork, it shows that a human has made it, and it gives it a certain value that a machine produced perfect artwork wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I think life is the same way, and people are the same way. Like, if you're completely perfect in every way, a little bit of magic is lost.
We are addicted to drama. We're addicted to like people's flaws. I mean, when we talk about social media influence,
I thought we were.
no, as humanity, as
Yeah.
like, I'm not talking about us like, oh yeah, we are addicted to drama. We're actually quite drama averse in that sense, but gossip and drama and people's flaws and mistakes. YouTube, for example, one of the biggest challenges I have with YouTube is just how much people love drama and conflict and like mistakes, and like for me it's very hard to really go into that, and like for me it's hard to be vulnerable on camera, to the point where I developed certain stories that, okay, now I've shared that story, so I'll share that story a million times and not be told that I share the same stories too much.
He does.
But like for me in the beginning, I didn't want to share any vulnerable stories. And then when I was like, okay, now I'll share these specific ones that are pre-approved in my mind. And then it's like, those are the go-to stories. So now I'm telling you this story. Now I'm telling you that story. But like day to day is like, there's so much more mistakes, so much more failure. And yes, imposter syndrome kicks in. And it's like, I don't want them to see all this bullshit. I don't want them to see all this. and we've had a lot of conversations because I know that one of the biggest things that we fail at is doing Instagram stories and Facebook stories and showing the day to day, doing maybe YouTube vlogging day to day. I know that's like one of the greatest opportunities for us to level up is to do more of the day to day behind the scenes, showing all the stuff. And that's why I started my personal YouTube channel. I started it. I haven't done much with it because I wanted to a space where I can kind of feel confident showing things behind the scenes, sharing my mistakes, sharing my struggles. And the podcast has been a great place for me to share kind of real, raw stuff. But I will admit it sometimes is a challenge to share what's going on in the moment, and I prefer going back in time than what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And then I share it once I've figured it out.
Yeah.
Once I've, okay, now I found a solution. Now let me share you. I found a solution for this, guys. But like sharing in the moment. And that's one of the things that social media, people love social media because people show their real lives. Yes, sometimes it's manufactured a bit. Sometimes drama is faked and whatever, but people like feeling that they know a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we relate more with people that we feel that we know. And the more opportunities we give them to get to know us as people, not just as artists or as influencers or as whatever it is, the more raw and real you are and the more you share your mistakes, the more relatable you become.
Mm-hmm.
And the more people are like, oh, he's just like me. Maybe there is hope for me,
Yeah.
right? So that is something very, very important that we have to understand that exactly when we talk about imposter syndrome, we have to get into this conversation about perfecting things or that need to perfect things or need to control our image. But we also have to explore how, hey, you might be doing yourself a disfavor by trying to control everything. And this is real. And this is me being self-aware, sharing with you something that I struggle with. And Steve sometimes points this out very eloquently. I often talk about we have to do more stories, we have to do vlogs, we have to do this, we have to do that. But I also put conditions and I go, first I want to organize the office more. First I want to clean the office. First I want to clean the aquarium in the office that isn't looking too good. First I want to do this, then I can do it. And he goes, but then it's staged and it's not real and raw and people aren't going to... And I go, yes, but I can do it real and raw. And sure, I mean, you can, there's space for everything in the world. But we all can reach more people if we share more real stuff, more behind the scenes, more the mistakes, more, and my imposter syndrome, if you guys saw my journey, when I first started, I didn't do much online. I really went touring and did a lot of events, workshops, courses. I did them in cool places like Japan and Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. Like I did a lot of cool stuff, but I didn't do my socials very well. Then I decided, okay, now I've developed the workshops, the content I've developed the element, I've researched, I've gotten to a point where I want to share this more with the world in a bigger scale. Then I was like, let's do socials. And then I was like, I wanted to look perfect. I wanted to, Instagram, I need to have the perfect template, and I need the perfect camera, I need the perfect microphone. And I'm proud of how our production value has improved over time. I'm proud of how we've done that. But just because you do high production value stuff, doesn't mean that you should stop doing the behind the scenes casual stuff, because right now Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, I mean, you take almost any platform, what is growing, how are people consuming content? Stories is a big thing. Do I do stories? Hardly. And that's a problem that I need to face, and it's part of imposter syndrome. And the beautiful thing about this podcast is many times we share topics with you guys and we discuss them. And we share both what we figured out and what we also are working on.
Yeah.
And Develop Your Element, like the podcast, it's called Unplugged because we wanted it to be a platform where we could be more real with you guys. And that's, for me, I know the biggest thing I have to do right now to overcome my personal imposter syndrome is taking my phone and being like, yo guys, and doing things behind the scene, casual, and share with you guys like in the moment where things are really hard, instead of afterwards when I figured it out. So that's something that if you can challenge yourself to be like, okay, yes, I'm gonna improve my production value, I'm gonna level up, I'm gonna get high quality stuff because it's important, but I'm not going to make that stop me from doing all this more real, more behind the scenes, the stories, the vulnerable stuff. Distribute your content in many different platforms, in many different ways. You'll reach more people. And also, yes, you have to make people feel that they can learn something from you, and with high production quality, you'll do that. But you also have to make them feel like you're relatable and that you are more like them than they might think. And that's where showing the raw stuff is important. So, yes, please level up and improve your quality of production, but yes, also share your vulnerabilities.
And recognize the beautiful thing about life is that there are more things to learn, more things to evolve. You can become a better person every single day by the choices you make in that moment. You know how to change your past is get to know yourself and little by little take a new step to the direction you want to take your life. And some days it will be, today I did not falter. Today I hit and I did it well. Today I learned something that tomorrow I'll be able to use or implement.
And I just want to add one thing now to kind of wrap up and finish with. The moment you're vulnerable and you share your flaws with the world, people can't use that against you. You take away all the power from it. So by sharing your weaknesses, people can no longer attack you based on your weaknesses. Like Eminem in 8 Mile, where he has a part where he's basically dissing himself so much that the other person can't diss him more. The reality is and I sometimes use this in negotiation moments and in meetings where there's some hostility, some negativity. I start by taking all the responsibility, basically sharing how I've messed up and how I'm a fool, how I'm irresponsible, how I'm this, and this. And then everyone is like, oh, okay, now we can focus on the real issues. But if you don't do that, they might have to spend an hour or two tearing you apart and making you see the reality of the situation. If you just go, yeah. And sometimes I even take responsibility for things that are not true or not real just to move on. But really, when you share your vulnerabilities, those vulnerabilities will no longer be a point of weakness for you. They now become a point of strength. But as long as you're trying to hide your vulnerabilities, your vulnerabilities amplify.
I do videos with my phone with bad lighting. Normally, I've been told that if I look like this, I look better. But it gets too uncomfortable. So often, I do the takes from this angle. So you can see my nostrils and my double or triple chin. And I don't use filters. What happens when people see me in person? They all say, "Oh, you're much more beautiful than I thought," and it works in my advantage. Seriously, I get to people and they say, "Oh, you're so much more beautiful," because they have seen the worst angle of me. So and it's low production. I tell you, only recently I have invested in a microphone and I've been at it for I don't know how many years, 5, 6 years.
She's been in personal development for longer than developed development has existed. For a long time. And a lot of her most successful work has been low production value, but just has been so real and raw, and something that I hadn't had the confidence to do it that way. And that's okay. When we say do more of something, doesn't mean do less of something else. And that's, for me, I found my confidence a little bit like how introverts find their confidence through mastery. I found more of my confidence through controlling my image a little bit, having high production value, getting some big speaking gigs, getting certain photos and certain videos, helped me feel more confident to now be able to be more vulnerable. However, I will challenge all of you to try to communicate your context, your tools, your information, your mission in as many different ways as possible. High production value, low production value. Do grow, do learn. I do feel a lot of people, they get stuck in low production value, or they get stuck in only like perfect high production value, and it's not real and people don't resonate with it. Find a balance. And I challenge all of you to look critically. How are you doing the work you do when it comes to communicating? If you are in social media, if you are in a normal job, I don't know what a normal job is in the sake of this conversation, but like whatever it is you do, ask yourself, what are you doing right? What are your habits? What are your comfort zones? Sure, double down on what you do well, but also what areas are you not exploring? What areas are you not working on? What areas can you grow? What areas can you have more reach or more impact if you develop that, or if you step out of your comfort zone? I am confident that you will have way more success if you do that. Every time we've chosen to step out of our comfort zone, it's really had a great impact for us.
Yeah.
And yet every time we give power to our fears instead of to our goals, we lose. And I will say every single day it's a struggle. Every day, a single day, we make many small decisions, and those small decisions, they add up. And I hope that you're making more decisions to give more power to your goals than to your fears. But yeah, that basically covers today's topic of imposter syndrome. Thank you very much, as usual, for tuning in, for listening. Anything anyone wants to add before we say
Thank
goodbye?
you very much.
If you want to be notified when we have more of these episodes live, go on YouTube. Please subscribe. Ring the bell. You'll get notified when we have more of these. You can also check out the podcast on other audio platforms like Spotify, like SoundCloud and such. But if you want to be the first, you want to have them when they come out, the fastest way to get them is through this live podcast. So that's all for now, and see you next week, same time, same place. Have a good one.
Thank you.